Good afternoon. This is a meeting of the Devens Jurisdiction Framework Committee. Today is May 8th, 2024. My name is Victor Norman. I will chair this meeting. I'll now call the roll. Alan Minoyan.
Here.
Janice Livingston.
Here.
Robert Pontbriand.
Here.
Rich Maori.
Here.
Brian Sawyer. Brian, are you there?
No. Oh, is Brian?
Here we go.
No, I don't know. I don't think Brian's on there.
Okay. Logan Breeze.
Oh, wait a minute.
Here.
I know.
And
Sorry.
Michael McGovern.
Yeah.
Bill Marshall. Neil Angus.
Here. Thanks.
John Catter.
Here.
Odile Smith, Kristen Cullen. We have a majority. We are in order. First order of business, we have approval of minutes for our April 10th meeting. You all have the minutes. Any comments? Corrections?
Well, doesn't look like anybody has
Is
it.
there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from 10 April 2024 as submitted.
Janice, is there a second?
Second.
Rich Maori. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Without objection, the minutes are approved unanimously. Stakeholder updates, Town of Air.
No major update. Our local committee is meeting today at 5:30. So we'll see what, I know Alan has a great agenda for the committee at 5:30. So we'll know more the next time we meet.
Excellent. Town of Harvard, I have no report.
Victor,
Rich,
will you just let people know I'm taking minutes?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Town of Harvard is responsible for minute taking. Paul Green has volunteered to take minutes.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay.
Thank you.
Town of Shirley.
I'm sorry. I'm just looking at the agenda. Do you want me to talk about the meeting that I was looking to schedule and I know the
No, we'll get that when we get to the
Okay.
Massville and
All right.
update.
The only update I have is that Brian Sawyer, we're gonna have to figure out, Brian is no longer on the board. Last night was the election in Shirley. I don't know if Brian is gonna decide to stay. He's thinking about that right now. If not, we'll appoint somebody else, so.
Very good. Devens representative.
Yes, we had our residents meeting, I believe it was last Saturday, at Devens to talk about the economic development bills and the sections 145 and 146 that were to talk about the housing cap. And it was well attended. We had roughly 60 attendees, which was good. It was attended by Neil from the deck as well as by Meg Delorier from Mass Development. And it was just focused on not what the legislation would possibly look like, but what could possibly happen if the bill were to be passed in whatever form, probably in July. And the residents had a lot of really good questions for Neil. And Neil has some really good guidance on the structure of what could possibly happen. And Meg talked a little bit about not much about the transition from Dan Rivera to the new interim CEO, nothing past that, just that it happened and a little update. But it was very well received and very well attended.
Okay, very good. Devens Enterprise Commission, Bill or Neil?
I have nothing, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right, very good. Moving right along, old business, RFEI update. Mike?
Yes, so that was posted. It went out onto the Central Register, Goods and Services, and Combis. The major piece was Combis. So I uploaded that. On the Combis piece, the contact will be me. On Goods and Services and Central Register is you. Just the way Combis work, I have to log in, as you know, Robert, I have to log in with a unique ID and everything then gets associated with me. So I'm the contact for that. It did go to, I think I looked quickly as it's uploading, so we'll send out our RFI to companies that are on the state bid list, so to speak, and that was about 17, almost 1,800 businesses that it will get sent out to. So it will be available, I think it is until June 13th. Is that the Thursday, June 13th?
Yeah.
Till 3 o'clock. So 4 weeks, basically.
So it will remain published for 4 weeks?
Yes, well, they'll have to have, it remains published till 4 weeks. They have to have the responses in by 3 o'clock on June 13th.
And what was the date it was posted?
It
sent in?
was the 6th.
6th?
So,
According to the email, it says the publishing date is May 15th.
that is for the Central Register. The Central Register Goods and Services was the 6th, as well as Combis. That is a week later. That takes to process through the Secretary of State, so. But once again, the main one is Combis. It's
Yeah.
almost 1,800 companies that will get it.
What does that stand for?
Commonwealth buys, whatever. It's basically, it's a procurement site that the state offers. They do all the pre-bidding, basically. So if I wanted to go and use a carpenter to do some work, instead of me having to get 3 quotes or whatever it may be, I can just go to the state Combis list and they'll have 10, 15, whatever it is, carpenters that I can pick from. And so I don't have to follow the 30B process. The state has basically already done that for you, so.
Right. Okay. Sounds
Mike,
efficient.
can I ask a question? Do they have to respond, or they're interested in responding? What has to happen?
They
by-
don't, they'll just get it and they could look at it and go,
Well, not that they have to
Oh.
respond, but what is the action required
Oh,
for them
yeah.
to get in the game? Is it a
Yeah.
full response to the RFI?
yes, we'll have to get a package from them and what their proposal is, so,
Okay.
yeah.
So also, just so to clarify, we're kind of bouncing off what he's saying too. Okay, so you're saying it's posted until June 13th, but responses have to be until June 13th? So if somebody looks at it tomorrow and they have to start like writing their response to you before the posting comes down, or is there like a week after that?
No, so
Okay.
if we don't receive anything by June 13th at 3 PM, then it's invalid. We
Okay.
cannot accept it,
Okay.
correct?
All right, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
The day after our next meeting.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike, for posting that.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Just a little aside, I mean, I'm actually kind of curious, what happens. I mean, we'll see what happens, so.
Right. Yeah, okay, good. Moving right along, update to legislative changes to Chapter 498. There was a hearing yesterday. I don't know if anybody patched in to it. I know there was a hearing on the entire bill. The governor spoke. Did you
I patched in.
Yeah, what, did they make it to the section?
80 folks that signed up to speak, so I didn't stick around for all 80. I just got the first 10, 15 minutes.
Okay.
It was nothing regarding Devens.
Okay. Do they publish the comments? They must. It must be.
They have to.
Okay.
I did
They're not
attend-
subject to the open meeting law.
What's that?
They're not?
The legislature's not subject to the open meeting law.
There's an irony there.
Big one.
Every move we make is in the open meeting law, but they can do whatever they want. Okay, no, that makes sense.
I attended as well, and I did speak.
Okay.
So the governor spoke, as you saw, for probably an hour about the entire bill. And Devens was the only time Devens really came up, other than the governor's articulation of the real housing crisis that we have and it's impacting our ability to attract employees and our ability to win as a Commonwealth was my section when we talked a little about Devens and echoed the governor's sentiment that we've got to address the housing crisis as soon as possible. So, but it was well attended, and the governor's remarks were on point.
What was the nature of your comments, Jeff?
I can absolutely forward the comments to you, but it was just that we do need to address the acute housing crisis, affordable housing crisis that we have. It's not only impacting our ability to have the people that that serve our communities, the EMTs, the police officers, the teachers, the nurses, they can't afford to live in the communities they serve. And that needs to be fixed. Additionally, we heard from Commonwealth Fusion Systems that they have trouble attracting employees because they just cannot, they cannot attract employees that are capable of paying the cost of housing, whether it's rent or purchasing. And so it's not just about, we're talking about workforce housing. And what do we talk about when we're talking about workforce housing? We're talking about scientists, we're talking about engineers, we're talking about a wide berth of people that are pivotal to the growth of this community. So that was basically the essence of my testimony. I'll send it off to you.
Okay. So I did submit written comments.
Yeah, okay.
And along the same lines, that no one takes issue with the need for housing.
Right.
What I focused on was the picking up on a letter that the select board had sent to the governor that a decision on jurisdiction needs to be made before people move in, not before planning begins or before the legislation is passed, but at that point when people really get serious about moving into the project, there ought to be a decision. You ought to know where you're living. Basically, was the thrust of the comments.
My comments were just the opposite. That jurisdiction has to happen after 2033, and the governor was pretty adamant that this crisis needs to be addressed now. So as you know, I don't know if you want to get into this right now.
Oh, we should. We absolutely should.
Our position is that jurisdiction and housing are separate and need to be treated separately. Now, I don't know what the governor's position is on jurisdiction and housing. I don't know what the legislature's position is on jurisdiction and housing being coupled, but for sure, if the jurisdictional discussion is attached to housing, everything stops.
All right, so if, in theory, a decision on jurisdiction is able to be made, and I'll get into that a bit, the next item on the agenda, what would your objection be at that point?
There is no reason to accelerate jurisdiction in order to give the Devens residents and the towns the space and structure they need to understand the issues, to get the RFEI, to do the study. There's just, the 2033 timeline should be, it was set for a reason and should be adhered to for a reason. There is, the Devens residents and I cannot get behind an accelerated jurisdictional discussion or decision prior to 2033.
Okay. Okay, no, that is not a new position. Janice?
Well, I mean, that being said, I mean, you know, even if the state had not changed 498, we were looking at 2033. And building was still going to go on. And we were looking at, you know, doing a rezoning to allow for more development and a different development. So nothing's changed, really. Yes, there's a change to 498, but the 2033 date is still there. The housing, the state deciding to make it a priority, doesn't necessarily change anything. So I don't see, I mean, I get what you're both saying, but I don't see where there's any fundamental change being brought forward, because even if the state didn't do what they did, we were still going to be moving on. Changes were still going to be made. We were all going to still, you know, as communities, talk about, you know, rezoning out there to allow for more housing and things like that. So I kind of said this last month, I don't see where this has made a change, except for it startled everybody.
Yeah, I think the distinction is, in terms of the 2033 date, is a distinction of when the redevelopment project ends. And that is separate and apart from a decision on jurisdiction. In other words, a decision on jurisdiction can be made, and the timeline for implementation coinciding with the legislation that says report submitted in 2033. And so
It says on or before.
it's on or before 2030 is actually the date the planning is scheduled to begin. And I think just the fundamental difference is that is it reasonable to expect people to purchase housing and not know at the end of the day what community they live in?
I did. And all the Devens residents did. So I think that I completely understand your point, Mr. Chairman, but I think all of the residents of Devens purchased without knowing, and they live on Devens. That's where they feel, and they've articulated they live on Devens.
Okay. Okay. I think that, just moving on to the next item on the agenda, mass development update, I think that will, having a new, even an acting director at mass development and eventually a permanent CEO, I hope that he or she will encourage a real debate on that issue that involves all the stakeholders, and we'll move that forward. On that line, I reached out to the acting CEO, Dan O'Connell, who's a board member, and asked him, informed him that his predecessor had been invited to this meeting, and asked him if he were able to come to the meeting. I did get a call back from his chief of staff, David Abdu. Don't know if that name is familiar. Clearly, he didn't think he could make this meeting, but I told him that give him the date of our next meeting, and he was going to try to arrange that to bring Dan O'Connell to our next meeting. I will keep everybody informed, and I'll reach out to him again if I don't hear back in a couple of weeks to see if that's going to be possible. So one thing I'd just like to bring up in anticipation of Dan O'Connell coming to this meeting, the issue will be Vicksburg Square. That was initially, that was the issue that on which we invited Dan Rivera here. Dan Rivera did get back to us with respect to the draft of the warrant article that was put before him, and he raised an objection to the prescriptive aspects of the warrant article. In specifically, I assume what he's referring to is the requirement that half of the units be home ownership and half be rental, and that there be specified exact number of affordable housing at 25%. So I'm not sure he will be prepared to debate that issue with us here. But what I wanted to put before the committee right now is that the whole intention of drafting that warrant article was to just demonstrate to the state and to the governor that the towns and the residents were capable of reaching consensus, and that we could make the process of using super town meeting effective in accomplishing, in this particular case, the reuse of Vicksburg Square. If you read carefully the legislation that's proposed, it raises the housing cap as well as the commercial cap, and it specifically mentions that there are no changes to zoning, nor changes to zoning bylaws that are being proposed in that legislation. But yet the legislation does signal out Vicksburg Square as a housing opportunity that should be dealt with. So unless something changes, we're still headed to a super town meeting in order to bring about housing at Vicksburg Square. And what the prescriptive aspect of the warrant article is designed to do a couple of things, primarily designed to get the legislation, the super town meeting, to approve it. The objection on the last effort was that a large project like this that was all rental was not a good fit for Devens. Air and Harvard, I'm not sure how Shirley voted, Air and Harvard voted down the proposal from
Trinity Financial.
Developer.
Trinity?
Trinity Financial is the name of the company. So anyway, not only we demonstrated at this committee that we're able to reach consensus on the language of a warrant article. The warrant article, as it was initially crafted, contained language with respect to jurisdiction. And John Catter and others raised an objection to that. The Air went along with removing it. Harvard's position was if the rest of the warrant article remains intact, then Harvard would remove that section of the warrant article. So what we have now is, and we voted on that warrant article with the prescriptive aspect to it. So I don't know where negotiations may go, but I think that the position that this committee has taken is that there should be a prescriptive aspect to it. If anyone has or would like to alter that consensus opinion, I think now is the time to bring it up before we meet with Dan O'Connell.
Well, I have a couple
Janice?
clarifying questions. Okay, so, and maybe I've asked this before, so remind me, okay? First of all, when we're talking about Vicksburg Square, are we talking about just the historical buildings? Or are we talking about the whole kit and caboodle of that area? Well, so much has been talked about, there being 80 acres and whatnot, or are we just talking about the historical buildings? I need to kind of narrow that down for my brain to process.
My speculation would be whatever was prescribed the last time we went to Super Town meeting on Vicksburg Square. Neil, what did that?
The four main buildings of Vicksburg Square. There are 2 or 3 additional other buildings that are part of the Vicksburg Square complex. But, I mean, that's something that definitely has to be defined. And
Right.
I think
So
part
on
of the
that note, in my opinion, that's what that article was saying. I could be totally viewing something wrong. So I do think that when you have these buildings, these historic buildings, we kind of went through this years ago with our old fire station, is you have this prescription of what you want. So regarding the buildings that we would hope, I know some people think, well, it would cost us, the town, money for those buildings. I still don't know how that figures out. If a developer comes in, they've got to meet all the historical criteria, and we've said out of those 4 buildings, we'd like so many percentage of them being affordable, right?
Yes.
Am I still making somewhat sense? Okay, I haven't lost anybody yet, good. Because sometimes I lose myself. So if that's being said, then we can focus on that part. So that discussion with mass development would be no, because we as towns have done that before, as far as for this, we want this. Now, regarding other portions of that areas that might be, when we've talked about the rezoning and everything, well, first of all, we would be rezoning it so that it could be adding in more residential. Am I still on track? Okay. And if a developer wanted to buy, I'm just going to use easy numbers, 5 acres out there, and they wanted to build something, well, then that would be a new conversation, right? So aren't we still, our argument is maybe Dan was reading it differently than what we were sending it as?
Yeah, I think that's why we wanted to bring him to a meeting to clarify that. But correct me if I'm wrong, but the way the legislation is written now, it raises the cap.
it
The
eliminates
zoning
the
is
cap.
already in place.
It eliminates the cap.
Eliminates the cap. But the zoning for that 80 acres is already in place. So if the cap is raised, then there's nothing preventing mass development from developing housing in the rest of the zone that is zoned for housing. And that's what the legislation speaks to. It doesn't expand it
Right.
into other areas. It just deals with the land that's currently zoned residential.
Right.
Okay,
So
but
once there-
that is that not a different conversation than just the Vicksburg Square?
Yes.
And
If
again,
you talk about Vicksburg
yes.
Square, people are going to say those buildings.
Right, and the legislation also provides for a committee of the towns and
Right,
Devens
right,
committee
right.
to get together to talk about
Right,
developing
but
housing.
that's going when the new legislation, it doesn't address what I'm saying right now, as far as if the new person of mass development was here with us today, and we were talking about what Dan wrote and some of his disagreement with the formula we came up with. you know, we're still talking about those 4 buildings, which we all know something has to be done with. Somebody has got to be brave enough to go out there and purchase it and be willing to put some money and make it the most beautiful thing that will have everybody, you know, running to this developer to develop other things, right?
In theory.
And that would be,
Yeah.
but it would be for this format, that, you know, so I don't think that we necessarily are having to change it yet, because I think that we still need to have a formula, because even with the cap being changed, you still gotta have some rules, right?
Right, but I think it's important to understand that the current legislation that governs Devens, the reuse plan, has a requirement for 25% of all housing on Devens to be affordable. That wouldn't change as part of this, and I think part of the discussion was leave it at the 25% affordable requirement and let the market decide what the mix would be.
Okay.
That's what Dan Rivera was
Okay.
in his correspondence.
That's what Dan Rivera was saying. That's what I have said in the past as well, too. You know, not, you know, voicing concerns about that mix, but, you know, I've already expressed those.
But that doesn't deal with the issue of whether it's rental housing or for sale housing.
Doesn't, but, you know, that's a discussion we could have, you know, with mass development, if they're willing to come back to the table.
And I'll say, you know, in context, 25% affordable, meaning 1 in every 4 units if you do multifamily, is very aggressive. Like I'll tell you, with the MBTA communities right now in here, we have inclusionary housing zoning bylaw. We do 1 in 5, so it's 20%. And MBTA communities is telling us this is functioning as a regulatory barrier. They're trying to get all the MBTA to go down to 1 in 10. So just say in the scheme right now with the Commonwealth, what they're trying to deliver for, they may push back on the 25% even, saying it's going to serve as a barrier to developers coming in and doing so. We just may have, and I don't know if we're going to mess around with that or not, but just contextually, that's what's going on also in the mix of affordable housing development. Yeah, right now.
Yeah, they want it for the tax credits. It's the easiest way to develop.
Oh, they will, that's right. They'll go for
That's
low-income
why-
housing tax
That's why you
credits.
have the affordable piece, and it's the
Yes,
easiest way.
it's the
for
low-income housing
developers.
tax credits, that's right, that's what.
Well, there are also
Use
historic buildings,
Yeah.
historic tax credits.
Tax credits.
Rich, you had something?
Victor, is your thought that we can't go in front of a super town meeting with, there has to be some knowledge of it's going to be rental or owned? Because if we just go in with, to Neil's point, the zoning as it currently allows is 25% affordable. That's it, that the towns will turn it down because there's not enough specificity to it?
Based on the past
Yeah.
experience.
Okay, I just want to be, and I get that, but I also get Dan Rivera's point of like, hey, you made it so prescriptive that we're going to have to find a unicorn developer who's going to be that perfect mix that's going to want to do it. And I'm just trying to figure out, is there some way we can find a middle ground where we're not as prescriptive, but there's something that gives the towns a sense, and the residents of Devon some sense of what the mix is going to
Yeah,
be.
it seemed like Dan Rivera was really focused on the development community. What are they? How are they going to react to this? I think in the past, he's really characterized Vicksburg Square. It's really a project in general that the development community doesn't want to deal with. It's really complicated, and I think the position that I would take is that, you know, when Bristol Myers wanted to come to Devens, Mass Development spent millions of dollars preparing that site for cleaning the site and demolishing buildings, preparing it for Bristol Myers. When Emerson Green did their project, they were handed a clean site. There was no environmental issues and were held harmless for any environmental issues. So my position, one of the things that Mass Development might do to entice developers to Vicksburg Square is to indemnify them from lead paint issues, asbestos issues, which is, they've done in the past, and they have the resources to do that. You know, the historic tax credit, Mike, you're right, that's a real attractive proposition, but it has to be, the developer has to maintain an equity position in it, which means it has to be rental housing. Mass Development they provide grants all the time. They can provide an equivalent grant to a developer to do the for sale housing. The tax credits, whatever, they can be monetized, and that's what developers do to raise capital to do their projects. So Mass Development can calculate what the capitalization rate would be of those credits and provide it to a developer. There's many things that they can do to make that, to cure whatever deficits the development community may recognize.
So let me ask this, right? So we can't do anything anyways until Mass Development signs off on this warrant article, right?
Right.
So to speak.
Correct.
So we can talk for the next 6 hours here on whether we think it should be as restrictive as, you know, the sale, rental. I think this is kind of crazy, to be perfectly honest with you. I think that we wait to see if O'Connell's going to sit at the table. We have a meeting scheduled coming up on June 3rd. You know, try and get a sense of where they're coming from in terms of what would be palatable for them for a warrant article, and have that discussion. Because until we can get that from Mass Development, we can talk to a blue in the face about a warrant article. It's, you know, I don't mean to sound negative,
Well, I mean,
but
I agree with what you're saying, Mike, but I think it's also important that we are having this discussion right now because the public is also now listening and understanding the problem that we're running into. So I agree, we don't need to be talking about it for another hour or so,
Yeah.
but I think it's very important that we did have this discussion because it is on tape and whatnot, and there are people in the room to know that it is being discussed and some of the hurdles. So for that purpose, I think
agree,
it's
and
great.
it's just my point is, you know,
Yeah.
at some point here during this discussion, we need to kind of
I agree.
either come to an agreement or move on here to the next thing.
I tell you, just the final thing I'd like to say, to Rich's point, there will be negotiations, but I think when Mass Development, if Dan O'Connell comes to this meeting and says, okay, let's start off, what is your position? I think we ought to be clear that we have taken a position, and that's our starting point, is the warrant article draft that we crafted. And now we can turn the table on him and say, we know Dan Rivera's position was it's not attractive to developers. You know, as you're suggesting, how do you feel? Do you still feel the same way? So I think it's just a starting point, and I agree. And I think we do have one. But
Mr. Chairman, through you, Neil, can I ask, right, the Vicksburg Square properties are currently available and for sale through Mass Development. They're actively available properties that are on the market. Do you know? I don't.
Are they actively marketing
Yes.
them? I don't know.
You don't know.
I don't know for 100%
So, Mr. Chairman, I was going to say, you know, Mika Brewer, I assume Mika is still the point person
I
for...
don't think he's
No,
around.
Mika is
Mika
no
is
longer
no
with
longer.
Mass Development. Robert Jenkins is
it's Robert Jenkins.
is with real estate, but I mean,
Yes.
Mass Development has indicated they've been actively marketing them throughout the years
Perhaps.
for the allowed uses
Yes.
that they're available for.
Yes, yes. I don't know if
school-type uses,
if there's any
small
worth of
business.
value to inviting, if it's not Mika, no, Mr. Jenkins, so I'm saying, how are you actively marketing these properties?
I don't think
No?
that that's this
Okay.
committee's,
Okay.
because I mean, we're not doing real estate.
It's gonna come down to Dan O'Connell, from
Yeah.
the top, and so I think the important thing is getting him to the table. I think, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I agree.
I
Are
mean,
they
that's
actively trying to develop and sell? I don't know the answer to that question right now. I don't know.
Well, we'll
We
ask,
can ask them.
we'll ask Mass Development
maybe
if we
they
can
don't-
ever get a hold of them.
Okay.
They do, on their website, they do list real estate that's available, and Vicksburg Square is not on that list.
It's not on that.
No. Mostly land is what's on the list at this point.
I don't know. I haven't looked at the website in a while, so I can't answer for Mass Development.
Okay, well, maybe that's why nothing's happening with it.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Okay.
So Neil, do you have any, just to close out this agenda item on mass development update, do you have any insight into things? I know Meg is there and she'll continue in that position. Do you have any other insights into change of attitude or?
No, Dan O'Connell has stepped in, as you said, and They are supposed to be conducting a search for a new CEO, but Dan is there in the interim, and things are still moving along.
Was on the board for some time.
Yeah, he was the Secretary of Housing and Economic Development under the Patrick administration, and so as that position, he was the chair of the Board of Directors of Mass Development. Once he left that position, he became a member of the Board of Directors of Mass Development, and he's since left the board to take on the CEO position, interim CEO position.
So that's good that he has
He's
good
got
background in
great background, yeah.
Nashville and Devens.
Do the CEOs tend to turn over every 3 or 4 years, it seems?
Right, he
the
did,
administration?
he still had some time left on his
2026.
contract itself.
Just
Lately.
historically, they
Yeah.
tend to turn over, it seems, every
Lately.
3 or 4 years, the
Right.
administrations.
Political cycles, maybe?
Yes, right.
Okay, is that anything else that we need to, any other insights? Okay, new business.
All right, I'm gonna share the screen. Let's see if I do this right.
Okay, moving on with our matrix framework, we have submissions from Town of Air.
Can everybody see the screen on Zoom? The packet?
Yep.
Okay, looks like everybody's nodding yes. Okay. All right, let me get down to the, okay, that was the, all right, here's the matrix.
Okay, Town of Air, do you want to just talk about your submission?
Alan,
Oh,
you wrote it.
I know it was probably a couple
with
of weeks ago, but
No, okay.
It was collaborative, yes.
Yeah, no, it was clever. And yeah, and we're just trying to be succinct with this, straightforward. So, should I just read it? Do you want me to read what?
well, yeah,
Well, yeah.
Okay,
with expression.
Summarize.
okay. I went to a dramatic reading of it, but no, the bottom line is, right, we've calculated, we know how much, what acreage are there in the existing recreational fields and open space fields. We actually have, the calculation there. My eyesight is so bad now I can't even really read it. And we, of course, feel we have absolutely the staff capacity, the professional capacity all around, to take on and to maintain, to sustain what's been done there, all the good with those fields, and to frankly continue to grow that, whether it's working with the very successful tournaments, events, and other agreements, doing things that our town needs. Town of Air is continuing to grow, and it's going to continue to grow in population. Our town park, it's becoming constrained. We absolutely, those fields would be wonderful for the sustainable growth of Air. And again, we have a very professional Parks and Recreation Department, but with that, expanded land and obligation, it would require, an expansion and escalation of staff, budgets, and then you start understanding, then that becomes new land that does have to be monitored by the police department. So, fun things happen out in fields at night and places sometimes, I won't get into that, but, okay. Okay, just, okay. And of course, again, with the fire department, and Public Works always plays a role in, working with our Parks and Recreation Department to make sure it's maintained. So the bottom line, like always in there, yes, if we took it on, it has to be done well, and we certainly have the capacity to do it. We also understand if it happens with Air, the Oxbow National Wildlife Refuge would come in, and we would work in partnership, of course, but the refuge is what it is. It's really meant to be left alone. And yes, we're prepared as always to, Air's ready to step up and take care of it very well. And it's important to us in the growth of our community.
As it is in Harvard, I'm not sure what the highest priority in town is, whether it's the school department or ball fields.
Yeah.
It's a big issue. So the Enterprise Commission, Neil, do you want to talk about your submission?
Sure, so it's basically status quo of what we currently do. I put together a bullet list of what we currently do. Natural resource protection is a big part. There is a lot of active open space and recreation fields at Devens, which Mass Development manages. But the DEC oversees, as the local conservation commission, the natural open spaces. We hold conservation restrictions, so we manage and maintain those. We work on historic and cultural features as well, too, preserving those. We oversee the implementation of the Devens Open Space and Recreation Plan in conjunction with Mass Development, and that's a regional board that has set up that. So there's still regional input on the open space and recreation management and oversight of Devens through that regional open space and rec plan. And as Alan mentioned, collaborating with folks like U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Devens has over 1,400 acres of permanently protected open space that we manage with Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Mass Fish Wildlife. We have conservation restrictions over Mirror Lake for things with the trustees of reservation, New England Forestry Foundation. So we work with all these organizations to actively manage and maintain those open space areas. From a more active recreational standpoint, Mass Development has an active recreation coordinator, full-time director. Devens DPW manages a lot of the active open spaces, all the fields on Devens, do an excellent job on that. We also have 13 miles of trails on Devens, so management of the trail system is something that DPW looks after as well. Mirror Lake as a recreational lake, oversight of that is through Mass Development as well and the Recreation Department. We also put on, the Mass Development also collaborates with the conservation restriction holders. We also host a lot of special events at Devens. So Devens Recreate, that's why we have a full-time recreation department. Regional, national, regional, and local events. So those are all things that would remain in place and continue to be managed in collaboration with the commission, Devens Enterprise Commission, and Mass Development.
Okay. This is really good. This, gives a lot of detail to other stakeholders so that they know the full scope of what is involved in open space and recreation at Devens.
And that's part of what we've kind of been saying all along is the continued, understanding the current level of service that the Devens residents and businesses experience and making sure that we maintain that. So it's important that everybody sees what.
Beyond that, the sub-region as well uses a lot of the facilities.
Yep.
Okay, John?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I can't speak to the plan itself. Marissa Rivera put this together along with her team, but as you can see from the first line in there, Devens as a town would honor the principles and standards established in the 1994 reuse plan, the DEC regulations, 2003 recreational strategic plan, RSP, and Devens OSRP. So I'm not going to get into much detail about this because Marissa did develop it. It's a very strong plan that covers recreation, open space organization, and others as well. So that's about all I can say about that.
Okay, the town of Harvard, this is put together in consultation with the chair of the new chair of the Harvard Park and Recreation Commission. Harvard has two entities, a Park and Recreation Commission and an Open Space Committee. And just as Alan expressed for AIR, both of these entities have been in existence for a long time. They have dedicated members and fully committed to their charge. Adding Devens to their responsibilities would be something that they would be willing to accept. I think that one of the mechanisms that we had designed into this plan is that what we put forth now is basically an initial pass at how each of the entities would deal with these aspects. So I would expect, certainly all the information that we gathered here today, I'll share that with the Park and Rec Commission and Open Space Committee in Harvard, so that they will have a better understanding of what's involved in open space and recreation at Devens. What I'm going to assemble these into one document, and we'll get it onto the website. So this material will be available for general public consumption as well.
So you want a separate section on the website?
Yeah, I think that would, if it's possible.
I have to create a new page. That takes me a moment. Okay, yeah, I can do it.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the next assignment has to do with social services, and that would be things like council on aging, veteran services. What else? What am I missing?
Veteran Services,
Disabilities?
Disabilities Commission,
Social services,
Social Services.
people that are unhoused, which we deal with. We have homeless people here that you have to work with. Yes, it's deep stuff.
Okay, so that will be, I'll get a memo out, I'll dig a little deeper into the scope of social services, particularly what exists now at Devens.
Which also gets into public health.
Yeah,
That's kind of a
Public
very
health is
broad
another
question.
one too, I
Yes.
think, right?
Yes.
well, there are different, later on in the matrix, there are different aspects of public services that are provided. But veteran services, doesn't contract with AIR to provide that?
Yes.
That's it?
Yep.
Yeah, so there are some interconnections already.
Yeah, there's two in air, so that we have a contract, we provide the veteran services, and it's been the longstanding policy of our Council on Aging and Senior Center that seniors that are on Devens partake in the programs and so forth at our senior center.
Okay.
Or can. There's no restriction.
Okay, good. So that should show up in the next.
Mr. Chairman, quick
Yeah,
word. If people can get their handouts to you, then you can get them to me and I can put them in the minutes for this meeting.
Yes, the packet. I'll get the packet for this meeting.
What handouts?
I think you
This.
should just.
Oh, yeah, you can just take a copy of the packet right off the webpage. Didn't you download it?
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it's not just this packet. I mean, John was offering some stuff, other people have offered things, so anything they want in the minutes, send them to
Okay.
Victor, and then he'll give them to me,
Well-
I'll make sure they're in the minutes. This we can get off the website, yes, but, I mean, it's a blanket remark.
Okay.
Okay. All right. The next item. Community One Stop for Growth Grant. Jamie Eldridge reached out to Rich, to you, and I don't know who else he reached out to, encouraging the towns or this community to submit a grant application.
Yeah.
There's a link. I don't know if
I
that.
got it right up.
Oh, perfect. You're right.
Could I speak to this?
Yes, of
This is
course.
the world I live in.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Be careful now. You may be volunteering for something.
I'm used to writing every grant that comes my way. Yeah, it's just right. What Michael is doing is this very general open, go after this, first of all, there are very explicit categories for each of these grants. And if you want to go for a grant and be successful, you don't do it backwards, like say, oh, there are grants out there, there's money. Let's find something to put, You have to have already been working on something, doing it, and now we're prepared, to pursue those grant funds. The other issue with this is, Community One Stop is set up now where there's a window called the expression of interest window. It closed on April the 29th. It's been open since. And if you don't submit now, and this is how this works with them now, if you don't submit up front to that expression of interest, you're already in a competitive disadvantage. The deadline for submission is June the 4th, right? You could submit a grant application now, but this is not how you do it to win. And like in AIR, we only submit grants that we win. That's what we do. because we know how to do it.
Right.
So I'm just this is fascinating and vague, but I'm just giving my opinion right now.
No.
We're at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll be sort of rushing it. If you want to rush it, you can rush grants, but that is not
Well, what was
a successful formula.
What was Jamie referring to? Does he have
I
some
don't think he even knows. If anything, you're going to go
insider
after,
information that
He did, if he did, he didn't share
didn't
it.
share?
if it's anything in these categories at this point, you're going after a community planning grant. That's the only category that would make sense right now, in my opinion, for what we're doing. But then you have to know, what are you planning for? What is it you're doing?
My sense is he was thinking this could be money for a plant, or
It's community.
Pay for the consultant.
could pay for the
What
consultant.
happened to the money he's earmarked? Did that go away? Is it no longer
He
earmarked?
did not get back to my text on that. So I'm just bringing it to you all so we can come back to Jamie and say, thanks, but we believe Mass Development should be paying for this, or thanks, where's the money you earmarked? But to send us on a bit of a wild goose chase behind the deadlines already in a pretty highly competitive.
It is extremely competitive.
I just want to be able to get back to Jamie, or have this body get back to Jamie with thank you, but
Now, he
that's
may
not
be
how-
able to juice it for us, and I shouldn't say that, he may be able to
He can't juice
express
earmark.
internally to say they did do the expression of interest, but, I'd like you to, give this special I don't know if state senators do it, but whatever, but the deadline is June 6th. If folks want to go after so we can do it. We could have done this months ago and gotten the money from it. The money's there.
I think
It's
we
there.
just get back to the center and say, at this point, we've been focused on other things, and maybe next year we would
Right.
prepare a little earlier.
Right.
We're a little early.
Right.
Get
Let's
it?
see what comes back on the
Yeah.
RFEI, and
yeah,
then maybe we are in a position to create a proposal for next year.
That's right, and we'd win it.
Thank
That's
you.
fine.
Thanks for bringing it to our
That's
attention.
that's how I wanted to do it, but I wanted to back with you all. I also don't want them to forget that Mass Development said they'd pay for this study. Now, that was a different regime, but, this is a lot of work to go after this. So I wanted to say thank you, but the timing's not right based on the deadlines, et cetera, et cetera. And still hold him to the money he appropriated for us.
Right.
And one of the entities listed that provides grants is Mass Development. So
Yes, they have their own,
Yeah.
it's very specialized grant platform, right?
Good.
now, in terms of what Jamie did last year was include $400,000 in a bond bill. And my understanding, the way that works is that at some point, if the administration wants to bring forth legislation or pass a bond bill, they go back to this list and select from items that have been placed there. And my sense of things is that it's not very hard to get something placed on the list in a bond bill. It's a lot harder to actually get the legislature to appropriate it.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I think Jamie is showing that he's, I guess, paying attention and he wants to help wherever he can, but I'm not sure how productive this is. Okay,
All
moving
right, so I can
on.
get back to him with thanks, but,
We did talk about it.
all right, good.
Meeting schedule frequency. Rich, you wanted to bring that up?
Yeah, just with summer coming and Mass Development still in flux, are we going to continue, and Mike brought this up last time, are we going to continue monthly, we're going to go bi-monthly? We were quarterly before we started talking Vicksburg Square, so I just wanted to get some clarity.
Well, I think my sense is we need to wait until, see what kind of response we get from Dan O'Connell. If he is going to show up at the next meeting, then maybe we get some sense of whether he is, his attitude is, nothing's going to happen until a full-time CEO comes here, and then that may affect our decision whether. Janice?
Okay. Well, I was gonna say that, so like my board, we'll go into like a summer schedule, okay? We'll make those dates, we'll pick those dates in June. So right now, we have an RFEI that responses are due no later than June 13th at 1500, which is a day after our normally scheduled meeting. So we could continue with moving forward with the June 12th, and if everything falls apart, we just say, okay, let's meet again. Or for the June, we could, before I speak, I hope the room would be available, maybe meet on June 19th.
Holiday.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so we could maybe look at a different date as to when the room would be available, so that then we'd be meeting after any potential RFEI responses. And at that point, we should have heard from Mass Development, and then we can make a better, knowledgeable conversation.
I was gonna say the same thing. I mean, obviously, we're waiting to hear back from Dan O'Connell. We're going to meet with Secretary Howe on June 3rd. So I think we should meet in June, because maybe we'll have some information to report back to the committee with that meeting that we were trying to set up. So it's 2:30, I think it is, on June 3rd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so, all right, so June 19th is the holiday. So I don't see anything on the calendar for June 20th, which would be a Thursday, if we wanted to meet after any RFEI responses are due.
This room is available.
This room's available on June 20th. It would be a Thursday, so it would be a one-off. Does that date work for everybody? I mean, obviously, if everything, if there's no responses and he can't meet, then we'll just be like, there's no point in meeting, we'll go to the next one.
Yeah, and I mean, if we meet at 3 o'clock, yeah, technically we could still be getting a response in while we're sitting here, or right before we sit down to meet. But we'll have a pretty good understanding of how many people, if any, have responded to this by then, so.
So,
Also,
what does everyone want to do?
Yeah, to be optimistic, I mean, you may get several responses that need to be sorted out before we bring them to the committee as well.
With who?
Yeah, I think at the very least, like I said, yeah, I mean, a lot of places, they put in their bids right at the last minute, right? But at least we'll have somewhat of an idea if I even have any responses, and if I have 5 or 6, and I can come back on the 19th, tell the group, hey, look we do have 5 or 6, we may need to actually meet in July or whatever. So just kind of play it by ear.
And there's also another wrinkle, and that is Dan O'Connell may get back to us saying, I can't meet on the 12th, I can meet the week before, or something of that sort. So that being the case, I would get back to the committee and see if that date works. So for the time being, Mike, just keep to our regular schedule.
Okay, so June 12th.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Public comment. Okay. Items for the next meeting agenda.
Well, by then, I think we should have we'll be doing the responses to question 3, which is social services. And we'll hopefully at least have a heads up as to responses to the RFEI. And anything else that pops up between now and then. I mean, somebody else could resign.
Yeah. Okay, and Mass Development is in flux. And this, I don't know if there are any changes to the proposed legislation between the May.
Excuse me.
So we will wait to see what's.
Keep an eye on it.
I want to thank everybody for getting everything to me prior to I can have it in the packet. Thank you very much.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So, seconded?
I motion to adjourn.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Without objection, the motion passes unanimously. We are adjourned.